Hello, so I want to talk about something, and I want to talk about how it's not good for the spiritual growth, to have to be in a position to have to work full-time jobs and to even going to school and college and stuff like that. Let me tell you how that pulls you away from, let me say, God, okay? Because God is not necessarily the God of the Bible. I'm talking about it's whatever. For God to me is my true self. That's the God to me. That my true self that doesn't have an individual physical body. It's the part of the self that can't create. Like we are co-creators. Okay. But and I feel like a lot of things that's going on with people are more spiritual than anything. Everything that's going on with people is spiritual. Everything that we see is spiritual. Even what I'm looking at right now, that's spiritual. That's something that's in my inner world. Even if I don't like the way it looks, it's in my inner world. And see, what I don't like about having to go to work, having to go to school, and having to deal with is that you can't talk about some spiritual things if something going on with you trying to keep yourself together at work, and you know something spiritual is going on with you. You might be under some kind of attack, whatever it is. You can't necessarily go on your job and explain to the manager that could be going on. Because a lot of times you'll be brushed off. It's getting to a point where you cannot discuss spiritual things. You can't discuss them. You certainly can discuss in the workplace, period. But I can kind of get that because people have all these different beliefs. That's why this whole thing needs to come down, though, because it's too confusing. Everybody got a bunch of different beliefs. It's too much, it's too much separation. It ain't that hard. See, it's too much separation. I get people have their different beliefs and stuff, but it's too much separation. That's too much separation. Okay? Because truth be told, in matriarchy, there was a spiritual system and it was not that hard. It was non-duality. People were communal. People helped with each other, and they had a common nature. Was the supreme being, the Great Mother. Okay, they all worship what you call the Great Mother. So it wasn't all these differences, all these different gods. It wasn't all of that going on. This is too much separation. So that's why this stuff has to go. But also, like my main point I was going to talk about is I'm going to just use an example. Say, for instance, right? I remember being myself when I was 5 years old. I remember saying this in an earlier video. I remember being myself when I was 5 years old. And between this about 6, I know I was going down. And 7, it's like I was completely upside down. And then I found out from somebody, by the time I was 11, I was just completely dead. Spiritually dead. Because the lady who was my mother at the time did spiritual work. But she didn't realize what she was doing. She kind of messed up it. But then I don't know what took over her, but she became very evil and kept doing spiritual work because something took her out and took over her because she was part of an organization. And whatever entities that are connected to the organization took her out and kind of possessed her. And then she became evil towards me, literally ever since then. She just became very evil, always doing work. But anyway, so I was completely gone at 11. I didn't realize that during that time. Now, I didn't notice all that was really going on. I knew that that was a serious change in me, but I didn't understand why. I thought it could have been autism. I tried to figure out what it was. Then when I got close to my 40s, what was it? No, and I was about 40, 39, something like that, 40. I realized that it was spiritual work done. There was an attempt of them trying to take my life or something. I remember getting real sick in the hospital. I think I was around the age of 5 years old and I almost died. And so they probably tried to do some spiritual work where I almost died. And I ended up living, but what they did was they just messed up me for the rest of my life. Okay? And the point what I'm saying though is by the time I was 11, I was completely gone, but I didn't know that during that time. I wasn't aware of that until like really not too long ago. A few days ago, I realized I died at 11 years old. Now, but what happens when you, like, what if I was to come back to those teachers now at my age, right? And I would have seen some of those teachers that were my teachers when I was 11 years old. And she asked me, what was going on with you? You seemed like you couldn't concentrate. You seemed like you couldn't focus. You seemed like, you just had all this stuff going on with you, because I was kind of bad. I was kind of rebellious. I had a lot, but I guess I had a right to be rebellious if I was dead. I guess I had that right, because I literally left the building, so I was rebellious because something else was trying to take over. Okay. But you know what I'm saying is that I can't tell nobody that, though. I can't tell nobody that. If I was to see a teacher right now that knew me from the age of 11 or 12 years old, and I would tell her that what I realized, that my life, that I became a completely different person. I was completely upside down by the time I was 7 years old. All my good qualities that I remember when I was 5 was completely turned upside down by the time I turned 7. 5 and 7. Now, people who know gematria might try to put that together. But see, this is a new age. This isn't during the 80s and stuff like that either, Like, that was during the 80s. So a lot of folks weren't thinking like that back then. Okay? And, and then, if I was to tell them by the time I turned 11, I found out that I was completely dead, but I didn't realize that until I was out in my 40s. I didn't realize that I was completely dead. I had to get like spiritual readings from real gifted people that saw that, and I already knew it. I knew it because I would see things in the spiritual world. I would see things that let me know that I looked like I was half dead. Like I was literally, I felt like that lady, the Tandy Newton. I felt like almost like Tandy Newton from Beloved. Like she didn't realize that she was dead when she came back to Oprah Winfrey, and she didn't know she was dead, and they had to send her back to the grave. I felt like Tandy Newton. But I knew I wasn't completely like Tandy Newton, but I felt like Tandy Newton. And so I knew something was going on, but see, it's like I wanted to talk to somebody to get some more answers. And I try to pay people who are really gifted, because that's the only way I get to talk to somebody. It's like I need to figure out, I want to figure out what's going on. But what I'm saying is, if I was to tell a teacher, though, that, I literally completely died at the age of 11. Spiritually, I died, and other entities have taken over. People are so practical these days. People are so practical and non-spiritual these days that they would think that I was crazy for saying that. They would think that I was crazy for saying that. It would have been easier if I would have said that I had... It would have been easy if I would have just said I was autistic or whatever, which you don't know where that come from either. Or it would have been easy if I just said I had some kind of diagnosis that's in the book that's already in the DSM-4, DSM whatever now. See, that's more accepted if I listed a condition that is already in that's already been documented by the scholars. That's more accepted, If I said I had what is it? Just the things that you just know that's a diagnosis already. That's already listed. Generalized anxiety disorder. That's something. But then where does it come from? Okay, because I had those symptoms, but where does it come from? It comes from the fact that maybe I was completely dead and other entities was trying to come in. That can cause anxiety, can't it? But see, people just rather hear things that are just they just, what it is a lot of those diagnoses are the symptoms. Those are a lot of symptoms and consequences and results of something much bigger, of the root cause. The root cause is never in those books. So like what I would tell you, like I died at 11 and I knew I left my body. I knew I was going. I completely left my body. Like I'm telling you a root cause, but they focused on the symptoms. They focused on definitions. You see? So it's like, this world is like it's almost like trying to function in this kind of world with work and school and just dealing with people all around where you just cannot have these kind of conversations with. And these conversations is really, the spiritual world is really everything. I know they say the world is mental too, but it's just the physical world is not, it's not real, but we identify so much with the physical world that it's hard to see that the problem with anybody you see around you is anything that's going on with anybody or anything that you see. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's trash on the ground. Whatever you see is somewhere in the spiritual world. And it's like people don't connect to that anymore. They're so practical. It's like if a teacher was to come back to me and say, what happened to you around 11 or 12? Why were you like that? I can't even tell them that I died and I left the building. I wasn't here. You can't tell them that. Because I have tried, and I've had to try to have this conversation with people who were religious. You got to be careful having that conversation with religious people because they will murder your spirit. They murder you. They'll murder you. Because they'll tell you what you're supposed to be believing in, who you need to go pray to. I mean, they will murder you. I can't have that kind of conversation with religious people. Yeah, and even like on jobs and stuff. I work in the healthcare facility, and it was a therapist that was talking about one of the patients. I guess one of the patients felt like she could talk to this lady about things like that, certain spiritual things. And so this lady who's a patient said that she feel like, and she's an elderly woman. And she said she feels like somebody has put black magic on her since she was a little kid. They've been constantly using black magic on her. And so I didn't hear the lady say this, but I was in the gym, and in the therapy gym. And then the other employee came back and talked about what the patient said to me and another therapist, talking about, this lady said that she feel like somebody put black magic on her. And I said, you know what? She might not be wrong about that now. People be practicing that Santeria. This lady is Latina. This lady, I don't know if she's Mexican. I don't know what she is. Hispanic culture. Let me say it like that. So it might have been some Santeria practice on her. They practice that Santeria left and right. She might not be lying about that, but see, that's the problem with this world. That's the problem. It's like you can't have those kind of, and this lady, and I like this therapist. I mean, I don't have anything against her, but this lady I don't know if she's Mexican or whatever she is, but this therapist that she spoke to, that she tried to call herself, wanted to confide in, she's an Indian woman. So maybe she felt like she could say that to an Indian woman. Because she felt like maybe Indians you would think they are so spiritual that you can say things like that to them. She probably felt safe saying that she felt like it was some black magic put on her because she was talking to an Indian woman. And Indians know a lot about some black magic. Like, dang. Like, you go to some of these Indian YouTube pages, you see all kinds of stuff about breaking black magic and all these chants about breaking black magic. Okay, so that lady felt like she could talk to an Indian. That Indian woman came back because, you know what? Yeah, it's a lot of Indians that are very spiritual, but that one, she might not know much about that life, though. See, that's what happens when you put everybody in the same box. All Indians, India, yeah, they're very spiritual people, and they're into their ancestors, into their deities. But at the same time, all of them are not the same. All of them don't have that experience with black magic like that. All of them don't have that experience, because in order to really be in the life of black magic, either you have to a lot of times people get into it because they have to learn how to protect themselves because they've been attacked so much that they didn't have no choice but to learn how to. They had no choice but to learn about it, because even if they didn't practice it themselves, it was practiced against them, and they had to learn how to really protect themselves. Now that's a lot of people right there. Okay, but then you have some that could have just run in their families, that could be in their bloodlines. And this lady, even though she Indian, she might not be about that life. Okay, everybody ain't like that. Everybody who's Indian is not about that life. You know, but yeah. So my point of saying is that it's like they were kind of her and another employee was speaking as if this lady was kind of out of her mind. Somebody, yeah, she feel like somebody using black magic against her, and just speaking as if this lady was kind of out of her mind and making up things like she was just going crazy. It's like, no, she ain't crazy. We got to realize that everything is spiritual anyway. You got to realize everything is spiritual anyway. It ain't physical. Everything is spiritual first, and then it manifests in the physical, but it starts in the spiritual. So she might not be wrong about that. That somebody's, and I don't think she's wrong. I think maybe in her family, maybe that happens a lot in her family. Okay, in the culture that she grew up around, maybe she saw that a lot. They ain't crazy. I said this too when I was at a hospital in I was working in Los Angeles, and this is around the time where I spoke out a lot more, because I don't speak out as much anymore, because I realized in the workplace you gotta have a different personality. You can't be spiritual out in no workplace, but you just gotta like almost be a robot. But I was in Los Angeles, and this another lady, Mexican lady. She kept having surgeries after surgeries after surgeries after surgeries after surgeries. It's almost like every time one part of her body was healed, something happened, she had to get another surgery. Like she could never stop getting surgery. Something was always happening to her. She was always back up in the hospital. And I asked her, I said, and this is while I was kind of still a Christian. But I was moving away from Christianity, but I was still kind of a Christian. And I said, do you think somebody is doing witchcraft against you? I said, do you think somebody might be doing witchcraft against you? She started crying because she felt like somebody was doing spiritual work against her. But every time she tried to talk to somebody, they wouldn't listen to her. They wouldn't listen to her. And she said she tried to talk to her pastor wouldn't listen. Let me tell you something. Being religious is not an excuse not to listen to that. Because let me tell you something. Back in the day, they used to cast out some motherfucking demons like a mug. Like, let me tell you something. Back in the day, I would like Christianity because let me tell you, they cast out some demons. They would cast out some demons. You hear me? Nowadays, they so freaking weak, they can't cast out nothing. But back then, they would get into that spirit, and I don't care if whatever white Jesus, whatever they were looking at, they knew how to heal people. They were serious. Okay, because still, see, what happened to me is that even though they might be praying to what looked like a different God, they still kept their spiritual gifts from a previous cycle. So they still, they still kept their spiritual gifts. And so people, they would heal. Like they could heal. Because a lot of those brown women, even though they was praying to white Jesus, a lot of them were the Sibyls. And a lot of those Sibyls were able to raise people from the dead. And a lot of those brown women, even though they went to the Christianity praying to that what you call a white Jesus, they still kept those gifts. They still kept those gifts. And a lot of men kept their gifts too, but a lot of women kept their gifts. And then all of a sudden, the Christianity, church just became very watered down. So people wouldn't operate in their gifts no more. Okay, they would no longer operate in their gifts. But yeah, so it's like that pastor, it's really no excuse. He should know about that. Like the fact that he brushed her off meant that he's not real. He's not real because even in the church, like the church is the main place where you feel like you got some negative energy on you, some demons on you, something like that. The church is the main place where you go to get that taken care of. The church is supposed to be for those kind of issues. But people are weak. They can't handle that. You go to a church now talking about you feel like you got demons in you. They can't handle it. They'll turn you around. They are weak. They are weak. They have no power. Zero power. It used to be some power up in that church. It ain't no power now. It's watered down. So, look, this current world, the way the perception of the way the mass consciousness, the way this perception of this world is right now, It needs to go. It needs to go. Now people talking about, oh, the end of Christianity. Well, let me tell you something. Christians ain't got no power these days. And I'm not just talking about individual Christians. I'm talking about, for the most part, the church. I'm not talking about individual people. I'm talking about, for the most part, the church. And the church is not the building. The church is supposed to be the people who call themselves Christians. But for the collective, they don't have power. So who cares if Christianity is gone? Who cares about a religion? Because the only people, let me tell you something, the only people who care about Christianity and that particular Jesus is the people who have a certain type of supremacy where they had an advantage. Nobody else should be really caring about Christianity, but the people who feel like they might have an advantage. Okay? Because, well, never mind. Like I said, those other ladies, those brown women, they operated in the gifts, they carried their gifts with them. They don't even, hold on, I'm just stopping for a second. They think it's the power of Jesus and all that stuff, but they don't know who they forgot who they were, but they were still operating in their gifts from the time they were sibyls or whatever they were, you know. Even some of them that was from the Egyptian times or whatever, they still operating those gifts, but they forgot who they were, but they were still operating those gifts, and they got so watered down to the point where now you don't have those kind of people anymore. You hardly have those kind of people anymore. So that religion ain't nothing. It don't need to stay around anyway. The only reason why somebody will fight for that religion to stay around is because they want to maintain a certain supremacy. Okay, that's what they want to do. They want to maintain a certain supremacy. Anyway, yeah. I just felt like talking. It's like kind of me just really wanted to express a little bit about how I feel about this world and how you can't talk to... Everybody say we're spiritual beings having a physical experience, but when you talk about some spiritual shit going on, they act like you crazy. They say that out their mouth, but they don't really live like that, right? They don't live like that. You talk about spiritual stuff that's going on, they don't know how to talk to you. They don't know how to respond because it's just words. It's like empty words, but it's not backed up by any kind of experience of that kind of life. There's no spirits. You say you're spiritual beings having a human experience, but you have no experience with the spiritual world. And we should have all experience with the spiritual world because everything is spiritual. Nothing is physical. Everything is spiritual. We just a lot of us only identify with 5 senses. And that has us attached to a physical type of world because a lot of us only identify with 5 senses, but that doesn't mean it's physical. Everything is spiritual. So the fact that you can't even talk about spiritual things with people like, oh, you know what? This world has to end. That has to end. There's nothing physical. It's all spiritual. People can say it's all mental. It's all spiritual. It's all spiritual. And you can't have a spiritual conversation with nobody. Oh, we can't talk about that because of what? Politics? Because of all these... No. This whole shit got to end. It's no time where you can't have a conversation about something spiritual when everything is spiritual. How the hell? You got to keep things physical. Or if you talk about something going on with you, you got to think of something that's more acceptable to humans nowadays, that's in some kind of diagnosis book. You got to come up with something that's in a diagnosis book so they can better accept it. Okay? So it's like, this ain't working. This ain't working. How you in the spiritual world, everything is spiritual. But then you talk about spiritual stuff, it's like you got to go back to just completely being physical. Well, you got to be balanced. You got to be balanced. And you know what? You got to be balanced between the physical and spiritual. You know what? Sometimes I feel like, and this is just me, sometimes I feel like being balanced between the physical and spiritual helps to keep the physical illusion going. I feel like if everybody just goes spiritual and see everything spiritual and know that nothing is physical and know that they're not individuals, I feel like a lot of shit wouldn't be. because then they'll know that they have more control than they believe they have. The fact that you try to hold on to a physical world, the physical is limitations. So I wouldn't want to balance anything that's limitations. Anything that's limited, that limits me, I shouldn't have to balance that. I don't want to balance the physical world anymore. You got to balance the dark and the light. To me, dark and the light, the dark means that's the spiritual world. To me, that's the womb. That's the mother to me. And then you got to balance the light that's more masculine. That's the physical world. So why do I need to balance that? Why do I need to balance something that's limiting? I don't feel like I should have to balance that because that's what's holding me back. I don't want to balance a physical world because everything that goes on, including like what I'm looking at right now, the cars I'm looking at, the satellite dishes I'm looking at, it's all in my spiritual world. It's all in my inner world. It's all in my spiritual world. Okay? Everything is in my spiritual world. And so why do I need to balance a physical world when the physical world don't exist? I shouldn't have to balance something that's not real. Why would I balance something that's not real? Anyway, yeah, I'm done talking. This is me and my therapy sessions. I don't want to balance the physical world anymore. I want to treat everything as spiritual from now on. See, this is my psychology. I'm going to tell you something. When I talk like this is a spiritual session to myself. And I just sometimes upload it so other folks can hear it. But, and some people resonate with the message. But it's really for me. Because you know what? When I start talking out loud like this and I keep talking, I stop and think for a second, and I keep talking, then I stop and think for a second, I keep talking, I get the answers that I'm looking for. Now, if I was just to sit there and keep on thinking, I've been thinking and not open my mouth and thinking, you ain't hardly got nobody to talk to. When it comes to stuff like this, you don't hardly have nobody to talk to. You got to go and pay somebody $200 to have a doggone reading session, and you don't know what the hell they going to give you. You don't even know how that's going to turn out. So most of us, when it comes to stuff like this, we ain't got nobody to talk to. So I like to click on record and talk out loud, but then I like to upload it on YouTube and see what somebody else think. Now you can have more of a conversation about it. And then somebody else might be thinking that at least they know they ain't the only one. People don't have nobody to talk to about this kind of stuff. How the hell? Everything is spiritual. Ain't shit physical. So it starts in the spiritual world. It starts in the spiritual first, and then it goes to the physical. If it has to start in the spiritual first, let me tell you something. If it starts in the spiritual first, that means there is no physical world. You're just in time. The spiritual world is not in time. And so the reason why it comes later, it can come 2 years later, because the spiritual world doesn't operate in the time that we operate in. We're locked in time. And so that's kind of locked in 5 senses. Well, we're not locked. Okay, we can come out of it. We have to just put the work in and come out of 5 senses. But a lot of us only identify with 5 senses, and we're in time. And so we see it manifest in what would look like a physical world, because that's what most people only use. They're like automatons. They only use their 5 senses, so they think things are physical. But everybody, I would say about 99% of people that I met know that everything starts in the spiritual first. If everything starts in the spiritual first, then ain't no physical. Because if everything that you see around you started in the spiritual, then ain't no such thing as no physical. I'm sorry. What it is that most people are only use their 5 senses because they have to work, they have to survive, they fear-based, the reptilian brain and all that stuff. And so they operate on their 5 senses, and then they deal with time, and they think there's a physical world when it's not. It's all spiritual. So I don't want to, from this day on, I don't want to balance a physical world. I don't want to balance it. I no longer want to balance a physical world, because a physical world does not exist. Everything starts in the spiritual world first, and then you wait until it manifests in the physical. You need to see what's going on in the spiritual. You need to see what's going on in the spiritual 5 years ahead of time so you can prepare for it, because now stuff happened to you. And me too, I'm talking to myself too, but I'm saying you, but I'm talking to myself too. stuff happen to you and you be like, oh, I can't believe they did this. This already happened in the spiritual. This already, like, what happened to me last week was already in the spiritual world a year ago. But the spiritual world don't operate on time. And a lot of times our timelines have already been planned out for us. We don't know what's in our timelines. Okay, so I'm done giving so much attention to the spiritual world because excuse me. Oh, I didn't mean to say that. Look at that. Look at that ego want to come in. Okay, I'm done giving so much attention to the physical world. Because what happens when you give all your attention to the physical world, you get surprised. Somebody do something to you, you surprised it happened, but it was already in your timelines. It was already in the spiritual world. It was already in the spiritual. And it just finally manifested in what looked like a physical world because most people deal with only 5 senses in their own time. They're dealing with time. And so it took about 2 or 3 years for it finally manifested in this physical world. And then you people get surprised. I can't believe this happened. Because they're not in tune with the spiritual world. I got to be 100% about that spiritual world. I don't give a darn about no physical world no more. I got to be 100% about that spiritual world. That's it. That is it. Because I shouldn't be surprised. There should be no surprises. I should know everything that's happening. Okay? Anyway, I don't know how I sound. I'm no longer caring about how I sound. If I said everything correctly, that's the problem. That's ego right there anyway. So I'm going to just go on this, upload this and not worry about if I sound perfect or not, if I was understood and all that crap, all that ego stuff. I'm done with folks understanding me. I'm in my 40s. I have yet to really be understood. I do not care. And most people ain't understood. You know why? Because the ego can't understand each other. That's why. Egos can't understand each other. We're trying to get another ego to understand us. Egos cannot understand each other. In order to really understand each other, you got to get out your ego. Okay? But anyway, I will talk later. Okay.